Hey everyone, Brian Balon here, and I want to share with you about land listings. And if you're interested in purchasing land, I have a couple clients and people who are actually interested in buying land. And so I've had to do a lot of research on how to make this happen. So I want to share it with you, some of the findings I've had, and taking from example one particular, actually two parcels of land that a client is interested in purchasing. I'm going to take you through some of the process of what we had to learn so that the buyers can build their project home on there. So hopefully you can see that okay. Yep. So there's two parcels of land owned by the same owner, and it has a easement for the city of Phoenix. This is actually a water runoff, and I drew these two lines to show where the runoff goes. Imagine this part here is higher. This is the front. Let's say this is that's a major road. And or not a major road, but a road, and this is higher than here, and it's on a slope of a mountain, so it kind of goes downwards. This is higher, and it goes downwards where the water runs off there, which is north. That is north. So with this said, this is an easement where they basically had the water runoff go around the property and out where it would naturally flow out. We saw a 1981 satellite view shot of the previous wash, and these dots here represent what it used to be before they actually modified this. So what they did is they dug I'd say about 7 feet or so here and 7 feet back there so that the water could run off. So it's just a modification to there. I asked, will this previous wash, which probably has been there for ages, will that affect the property? And because it was so small, according to the satellite view, which you estimate maybe it was 5-6 feet, maybe. I mean, that's my best guess. It had very minimal impact on the actual land. So not necessarily concerned there unless it was larger, but that is the new easement for the city of Phoenix. So buildable land is within these boundary lines. And by the way, these are connected. That's what I intended to have these connected. So with that said, there is less land to build on. Then you have to consider setbacks. So most lots, if not all lots, have setbacks from where you're only allowed to build a certain distance away from your property line. So which is why you see houses, if you're buying a new build or you just see houses, they're not exactly up to the fence line. There's a gap. Those are because of setbacks. So the setbacks here were actually, let's just do here, 25 feet in front. Let's see if we can just... So 25 feet and 25 feet, and then 25 feet in the back. And then it was 10 and 3 on the sides, but you get to choose where your 10 and 3 is. So in this case, the buyers, it would be in their best interest to use their 10 feet here. So 10 feet, because it has the wash there. So they can just use their 10 feet here, and then they have their 3 feet here. So they have more buildable square footage. If you use your 10 feet there, you have less buildable square footage. Here, it really doesn't matter. But since, based on their project, they wanted these closer together, more than likely, they're going to want to choose 3 feet there and 10 feet there. So, by the way, there's another lot here and another lot there that has existing structures built on it. So given setbacks and given the easement, there was estimated, I think I'd estimated around 39,000 square feet of buildable land. So from your setbacks and the easement, you have about 39,000 square feet of buildable land. Now, here's the thing. I believe the total amount of this whole thing was about 50, put it the hard sign, 54K square feet. So 54,000 square feet, hopefully you can read that, there's a 40% rule. So you take 40% of 54K, and whatever that number is, which I believe we calculated something around 20K, the 20K, let's say it's 20,000, you guys can do the math at home, say it's 20,000, that is the total amount of structure that you can build on these two lots. So 20,000 square foot home, that's a lot because it's a bigger property, and you don't actually have to take into consideration the easement. So you're getting the entire gross amount. So that's very important. So the 40% rule, sometimes it varies depending on whether there's an existing site plan, which has what they call stipulations. If they have stipulations, then that further restricts what you can do. And if you're interested in modifying those stipulations, you'd have to go to what's called a public hearing officer and basically contest for modification of the stipulations. It's about a 6-week process, and it's not as time or labor intensive as creating a site plan or establishing stipulations. Is just modifying stipulations, but still, there's a process of about 6 weeks. So there's that as well. And another thing that you want to be sure of is just whether it is on city water sewer. Is it on a well? Is it on a shared well, private well? Is it on a septic tank? Is there going to be a septic tank put in there? Is there not? So these are some important questions, because if you're out, say in North Phoenix, so a couple examples, north of Happy Valley Road, there's a community there where it's just a bunch of septic tanks and there's a well, shared well there. If you go further north, just south of Anthem, you'll also find properties like that where they're just on septic tank and a well. So that does change things. You'll need to have a septic tank inspection, a well inspection, that kind of stuff. It's not completely out of the picture, but it's just a little more complicated. Thankfully for this property, it has a sewer tap right here. So sewer tap, super important to research. Sewer and water access. Typically, if there's homes next to you, it won't be there unless it has some water, electricity, and some kind of sewage treatment facility, whether it's public or a septic tank. But so that'll give you a hint. So in this case, it had its own, properties that were already on there. So more than likely there was, and it was in the middle of the city. It's in North Phoenix, so more than likely you have sewer access and public water, which it did. It has a sewer tap right here, and I believe the water tap was like right here. So water, and then it had like in the center, almost in the center, it had its APS electricity box. So the basics are hooked in. Now, does it have gas? That's another story. You'd have to ask your neighbors or call Southwest Gas or the local gas company, most likely it's Southwest Gas, to find out. That wasn't so much important to the buyers as it had electricity already, and they were fine with that. So there's that. Another important thing, you want to find out if this thing is on a floodplain or a flood zone. So there's a difference between floodplain and flood zone, and there's different tiers of floodplain, flood zone. So check this out. So let's say you do a floodplain. So let's just do flood zone. A flood zone, I don't need to write this down. The flood zone is basically an area where water can collect under an acre. So that is its own tier. When you go to get insurance for a property, let's say you build a structure on here, you want to get homeowners insurance on it, then they will quote you based on whether they will look to see if it's a flood zone, floodplain, and like I said, like a flood zone has different tiers. There's flood zone X, there's flood zone, and then they have different specifications to see how severe it is. So again, a flood zone is basically an area where water will collect under an acre. So that's one tier. So into your flood zone, there's flood insurance that's required usually if you're in a flood zone. A floodplain is much higher risk for flooding, and it's for any area where water collects over an acre. So the way they do this is they actually get an engineer to survey basically and to analyze flow rates and the possibilities of during a specific amount of rainfall, how likely is it to pool water or to flood, if you will, and how high. So they do that. So an engineer actually comes out and analyzes that, and then therefore becomes public record. You can try to contest it. It is a difficult process to contest if your house is in a flood zone, but if it is, then flood insurance has to be comes with your homeowner's insurance in the property. So that is an extra cost. So that's another thing to think about when you're purchasing a home. Is it in a flood zone, floodplain? Are you willing to pay that insurance? When I was looking, I saw some properties out in North Phoenix that were in a floodplain, which, well, this is like south of Anthem, and you can only imagine, like, the possibility of, I mean, it was a blank land, 8 acres, raw land, and yeah, I mean, the challenges could be incredible. It doesn't have, it didn't seem to have, they didn't list that it had a well, electricity was not listed, and sewer was not listed. So it's just a lot of, you're really starting from scratch when you're building from something like that. So you have these two lots here. The other thing too is that you want to consider, what your project is and whether that fits your bill. Keep in mind that these particular buyers were looking to do a specific kind of custom home, and they were trying to figure out whether they could combine the lots. And researching that, in this case, because this was built on an existing site plan, which you can look into, if your lots that you're looking to build is surrounded by homes, more than likely those two parcels or the parcels that you're trying to buy were part of a site plan. And because of that, it comes with those, like I was mentioning before, stipulations, a lot of different things. So you're going to want to see what those stipulations are, what the site plan was built out for, and any limitations that you have in terms of building here, which can all be had in public record. You can get access to that in public record. But it's important before you purchase something or go under contract that you do your due diligence to find those things out. Got a lot of information in regards to building one existing structure on both, and if you wanted to combine it. And then the combination of these lots was it was a process. Because it has stipulations, because it was built on a site plan, combining the lots would have been a lot more challenging. So the process that we heard was that it would take 4 to 6 months. So essentially you'd start out by petitioning for, which is just an application, so they call it a pre-app. So you would do a basic application to try and request for a lot combination. And then after that, they'll hear you, and it goes through a series of hearings through different, so you'll have to have a zoning hearing, you'll have to put up a sign saying zoning hearing, you'll stand before like several panels. I think it was at least 2 or 3 more panels to contest that for the reasons why you think that this should be a combined lot, what your uses are, etc. So it is definitely a lengthy process, and none of them are actually decision-making bodies. They only can recommend to the final decision-making body, which about 4 to 6 months out you will sit before, and they will make the ultimate decision based on all of the hearings, all of the meetings that you've had, and all of their recommendations. They will hear it themselves and make the final decision. And it's not guaranteed to have this actually go through. So it gives you a little bit about what builders potentially, new home builders or these custom builders go through in order to get a subdivision going. But yeah, so anyway, these clients, they were interested enough to put an offer on this based on the research that was done on it. And if you're interested in buying a house, but you want to build your own land, like you want to start from scratch on raw land and then do it yourself, it definitely is good to have someone that knows what they're doing, what to look for, and also to just get educated on what exactly you're getting into. So hope this helps you guys out, and we'll see you next video.